Hey, it's Friday night,
It's
everybody.
Friday night. And no, let me not go there. I might bring up a lot of old thinking.
Stop it. We want to welcome you to the Pastors Roundtable on this November 3, 2023. Raj, it is already November, man. We are almost at the end of a whole new year, brother.
Yeah, man. We started off thinking, looking ahead of us. We had a lot to do. We have a lot to happen in the new year, and now we're looking like, man, what happened?
Mercy. Hey, we've got Facebook user joining us tonight from Huntsville, Alabama. Good evening, Facebook user. I know whenever it says Facebook user, that's somebody who's watching from the group page because
Yeah.
we can't tell who you are because that's what you just saw on screen is what we see. But we are happy that you have joined us tonight. Thank you for joining us. If you're joining us from wherever you are in the world, we want to know where you're joining us from. So hop in the chat, say hello, say good evening. Let us know where you are watching from. We send greetings from our missing co-host tonight. What's he saying, Raj?
Is that what who said? I don't know. He's doing his thing. I don't know. I came on late to the
Gotcha.
pre-show, so I'm not sure what happened.
Well,
And
we want y'all to know he misses you guys when he's not here. He loves the
yeah.
interaction, being able to interact with everybody. So he's just unfortunately unable to be with us tonight,
Oh,
but he sends his greetings to our live audience and our replay audience tonight as well, Dr. Dion Henry. Um,
yes.
all right, Raj. So talk to me, man. How's the week been? I know that you were not with us last week. Something was going on there. Anything to
Yeah.
share about that?
Listen, we had us a interesting week. We were out of the country. I went visited with my mom. Actually, took her back to Trinidad, so she is not in the beautiful southern state of Georgia tonight. She is
Not
in
tonight.
Trinidad, in the Twin Islands city, the Twin Islands state country of Trinidad, and so she's there. I visited with my father there in Trinidad. My sister and my family came back and had to go in and do a heart procedure. Now, don't get too alarmed. It was a heart procedure. We got it done. Everything worked out well. We praise God. I'll tell you that story another time. And so it
Hallelujah.
was a very relaxed week for me because I was told to reduce my activities. So today I am very excited to be a part of my PRT family.
Amen. Sounds like your doctors told you to reduce your risk this week. Yeah, I like it.
Yes,
like
yes.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, listen, very quickly. I don't know, Raj, were you able to watch the show last week?
Yes, I did. We
No,
were
you
excited.
didn't, because we didn't have one last week.
Ah,
Uh,
no, 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 no. You know what I thought about? I thought about the two promos we did.
there you go. Yes,
Yeah,
indeed.
yes, yes,
So we
yes.
all missed you guys last week, but we're glad to be back
Yeah,
tonight.
that's
I
you caught me. You caught me. I was
Yeah, I
napping.
caught me too because I was sitting here trying to think, man, what did we do last week? How'd it go last week? What was I was trying to remember the topic last week, and we weren't here last week.
Right, right.
I see Andrew Brown joining us from Berrien Springs, Michigan. Good evening, fam.
Mhm.
Good to see you with
Yes,
us in the
yes.
building tonight. Listen, I got to do Dr. Henry's part tonight as we're beginning tonight. If you've joined us tonight, our conversation is going to be a very powerful one. It's going to be it's a very necessary one, and we want you right at the beginning of the program tonight to share this with somebody. Before I push too hard on sharing it, though, Raj, we got to tell them what it's about. So, what's on the table tonight, Elder Wade?
Wow. Tonight, we are going to be talking about the ministry of risk,
Mm,
managing risk within the church, as a local church, conference, the entities of our church, members, and our employees.
all right. All right, so risk management. This is a risky business ministry. There's risk that comes along with ministry, and so we're going to be talking
That's
about
right.
to
That's
that
right.
that tonight. Who's joining us? Who's at the table tonight, Elder Wade?
Well, listen, when we were thinking about who to come and help us with this topic, we went top. We are glad to have with us the CEO CEO/president of Adventist Risk Inc., which is the Seventh day Adventist Church's insurance company. You'll hear more about that
Oh,
a little
wow.
later. So, James Winegardner is going to
All
be
right.
with us in a few.
Hey, can I do this right out the gate tonight? Just hey, this is the the CEO, president of ARM. We call it ARM, but Adventist Risk Management.
Yes,
So
yes.
make sure you take this opportunity right now to invite somebody to come and be with us tonight. You can go ahead and share the stream if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Little things help other people see the stream just by pressing that little thumbs up button or a like button, typing in the chat. All of those things help more people see the stream tonight. So we want you guys to type. We want you guys to hit your thumbs up. We want you to share the stream. It's really easy on Facebook. You hit the little share button and that'll go around. So we invite you to do that tonight. We want to welcome our audiences, our various audiences tonight. Some of you are watching on my personal page. Some of you are watching on Roger's page. But we also have the illustrious South Central Conference that is streaming for us tonight. And so we welcome those of you that are joining us from South Central Conference. If you are in the South Central territory, we want to shout you out. Go ahead and shout that out in the chat. We want to know that South Central is representing in the space and in the place this evening. All right. To introduce our program this evening, we want to show you a quick little video, and we're going to cut to that right now. Wow, our ministry is to protect your ministry. It's fascinating that the Seventh day Adventist Church has its own insurance company. 1930, I think it
Yes,
was 37 is what I saw there. Well,
yes.
listen, let's bring on our guest this evening, Pastor James Winegardner, or Elder. I don't know if we're supposed to throw that out there, the pastor part. Um, James Winegardner, what an honor, what a privilege it is to have you with us tonight on the Pastor's Roundtable. Thank you so much for joining us.
The honor's mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Uh, Go ahead, Roger.
So, Elder, as you heard, we've kind of just dribbled a little bit of who you are, the president, CEO of Adventist Risk Management. Um, my co-host called you a elder, but we know that you're an ordained pastor in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And but share a little bit more about who you are to our viewers, so we can get that insight as we begin our conversation tonight.
Sure. I grew up in a half Seventh Day Adventist home and went to public school. And when I went off to college, I had an experience that drove me toward not only faithfulness to Jesus, but also toward the ministry. And so I
Mm.
wound up at Southwestern Adventist University in Keene, Texas, and
Hmm.
worked for the Texas Conference for a few years. And then I went off to law school and
Okay.
became a lawyer. and practiced law for 25 years in insurance and other areas. And then after all that happened, the church called me back to serve as a pastor again, and I ultimately wound up pastoring the Keene Seventh Day Adventist Church, where I'd gone to college. And
Oh,
then
wow.
while I was pastoring there, they invited me to come back to Adventist Risk Management, where I had served as the claim director some 20 years ago. And they asked me 2 years ago to come and serve here as the CEO, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 years.
Nice,
Wow,
nice.
that's awesome. That's awesome. Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, listen, we want to jump in, Raj. Let's go ahead and
Oh,
begin with a word of prayer.
yes,
And
yes. I was
and
just about to say
uh,
that.
Raj, if you would open up for us, Doc.
Sure. Let us pray. Father, we thank you again for this, your show, your evening, your opportunity, your people. And we thank you for our guests joining us. We pray, Lord, that the discussion would be fruitful and bring resource and knowledge, acknowledgement to the ministry of risk management in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We pray, Lord, to direct this conversation. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Amen. All right, I want to jump in starting off. I'm looking at your website right now, Winegardner, and I think we have a screen with that up there, and I want to zero in on that line, that phrase that is the banner on your website. For those of you that may be interested in taking a look at it, it is simply adventistrisk.org, adventistrisk.org, and it says our ministry is to protect your ministry. Talk to us about
Mhm.
that. What do you mean by that? What's meant by your ministry is to protect our ministry?
Well, every one of our employees is a member of a local church and active in a local church. They all do ministry. Uh, the ministry of our organization is not to do ministry. We don't typically do evangelistic series and crusades or anything like that. What we do is, I always say, everything we do is to either preserve, protect, or restore assets for your
Mm,
ministry.
Hmm.
And
mm,
so the assets are out there. They're all at risk. They're all at peril, especially if you're, in a wildfire area, or if you're in a hurricane area or a tornado area or an earthquake area. And so our role is to make sure that when those risks affect you with a loss, that we are there to put it back together as quickly as possible, to prevent loss if possible, and to correct the problems when they come up.
mm.
Wow, that sounds like a full-fledged like insurance company, like with claims and like many people have with their homes and everything like that. So,
If I can,
you're
I'll share with you what we have. We have a
okay.
claims department, of course,
Uh-huh.
but we have a captive insurer that's actually domiciled in Vermont, where lots of captive insurers are. So we own an insurance company, and that insurance company then the administrative management arm runs that with a marketing department, that people that go out and actually work with conferences and conference leaders and administrators to help them make sure they properly insure all their facilities and people. And then we also have an arm that does the healthcare for all the employees of the Seventh Day Adventist Church in North America. And then we have, well, the United States. Canada has a socialistic health care system, so we don't do that. But and then we have an underwriting department. We have a department that does communications, like that beautiful video and website that you saw,
Hmm.
and so we're a full-fledged insurance company that lives and works in Maryland, but is domiciled in Vermont.
Okay.
Wow, wow.
So,
So,
so Roger, I have a follow-up
interestingly,
to that, if I can, Roger. It,
yeah, go ahead.
so people have just heard that Seventh-day Adventist Church has its own insurance company. So can I go and cancel my homeowner's insurance with Farmers and give you guys a call, or Edna or whoever, and say, hey, I want the church to insure my home and all of that?
We would
What?
love that, but we're owned by the church, and so we can only insure typically what is either in the yearbook. You don't know what the
Mm,
yearbook is, right?
hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But explain that to our audience. Our audience may not know what that is.
There is a book that's published every year that lists every official denominational organization entity and person employee.
Mm.
And so it's a big, thick book that gets published every year, and that is our potential market. We don't force anybody to insure with us. Everybody has a choice. But if they want to insure with us, those entities insure with us. Typically, what we do is commercial insurance, except in South America. In South America, we do insure through a brokered arrangement through other insurance companies, but we handle the claims um, for every worker's house, car,
Mm.
uh, devices, and life. So
Wow.
we insure every worker. I think there are 50,000 in South America through our South American Brasilia office, and so we do that there. We'd love to do that here, but as you know, North American pastors are a little bit of a more independent breed. I'm not sure they'd all sign on for that.
Now, at least from what I heard from the question that Pastor Paul gave, you might have one at least on this show with you. But I was going to ask, as you talk about our ministry is to protect your ministry, most other entities within the church, you pointed out you don't do evangelistic or don't do ministry at all. But you know, everybody else in the church thinks that that's what they're supposed. All the other departments kind of just they buy into the fact that we got to do some kind of ministry. But how would you particularly explain the protection ministry as opposed to having a ministry that has baptism?
So we do have a couple little mission projects that we do, but that's not our focus. And so we do that just to be shoulder to shoulder with others who do those ministries. But what we do is we help every entity. We insure the entire world, okay, but
Wow.
85% of the value of the insurance and the premiums and all that comes from North America, just because
Mm.
the values are higher and the liabilities are higher. And so we have people who go out, myself included, who train conference administrators, pastors, teachers, and other workers in safety practices. We pioneer for all kinds of policy changes that will improve the safety of the churches and their people. We believe that a church should be the safest place on earth
Hmm.
for people to be, and so
Mm.
we work really hard to get everybody practicing the safest possible policies. You know, there's always a problem when you have a commercial building.
Mhm.
A commercial building, bad things can happen. I was just starting at the Keene Church. I was sitting there in my first meeting in the Keene Church. It was a big choir concert, and the tornado sirens started going off.
Mm.
And I asked, I said, "Well, what do we do when the tornado sirens go off?" And if you've ever lived in Texas or the Midwest, you know that they you can hear them all over town, right?
Yeah.
And they said, "We don't know."
Oh boy.
Oh my.
Ah!
Yikes. Wow.
Yeah. So that's we try to make sure that people don't ever come to a place where you don't know, uh,
Mhm.
and so we do a lot of training for that, and of course we fix it when it breaks.
Oh, okay.
All right.
So that leads me to this next question. The uniqueness of Adventist risk management as opposed to risk management in general. What 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 gives Adventist risk management the edge for
Sure.
the Adventist Church?
There are other insurance companies that insure churches. Obviously,
Mhm.
every church probably has insurance, right? So
Mhm.
the Baptist churches and the other churches, they all have insurance. The difference, of course, is that we know our church. The
Mhm.
structure of our church is pretty complex, and I don't know that we want to get into all that tonight, but the structure of our church is pretty complex, and so we have master policies that come down from the top, and we have base policies, package policies that come up from the bottom, and they all kind of meet in the middle with excess, and so we have a lot of different knowledge that nobody else in the world has, and so
Mhm.
we're here to protect our church. When another company out there gets a claim on a church, the first thing they do is try to figure out, is there a way we can preclude coverage or not pay this? And when Adventist Risk Management gets a claim, the first thing we do is there a way we can pay this? Because we know
Okay.
that your church needs to be working again.
Hmm.
And so we have those issues, and we have
Had to throw
others.
that in there.
No, that
And
that that is a major. That's a
Yeah,
major
that's
thing,
huge.
you know.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
That's major. Yeah.
And the other is that we know the people.
Mm.
We do have a pretty high turnover in North America in terms of leadership, but we know most of those leaders, and they know us. And I thought when I started in insurance that insurance was about money, but the truth of the matter is that insurance is about trust.
Come on.
And
wow.
so we trust our administrators. People say, well, you insure a lot of schools. Schools are high risk experiences, and they are. But the Seventh Day Adventist Church is really good at doing schools.
Mm.
We're good at it, and very professional. And while there are sometimes problems, generally there are not. And so
Mm.
we're good at it. And so ensuring it is actually a pleasure and a joy keeping schools safe and open.
Mm.
Good.
Awesome.
Let's talk. I know this wasn't in our sheet, but I think this may be enlightening and helpful. The types of insurances that the church offers. I think most of us think about property insurance and liability insurance. Are those the main things, or any other type of insurance besides those? And then could you break those down for us?
Sure, absolutely. Those are the two biggies. Let me mention a few ancillary ones too. Um, we insure a lot of travel policies. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know if when you buy an airline ticket, sometimes it says, "Do you want to buy the insurance?" Right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Hmm.
but we do that for our workers. We have a number of packages of that kind of travel insurance that we do. We call it PEB, personal effects baggage, and some other ones. So when you want to take a mission trip, for instance, we usually would like you to call us, and we'll insure the whole mission trip.
Hmm.
That includes illness, repatriation, and all that. We call that short-term travel, and we those are a lot of different policies. That's a high volume but low loss kind of thing. But it becomes
Mm-hmm.
very, very important when somebody is overseas and has a gallbladder attack or a heart attack, heaven forbid, or some other things, because they need to be brought immediately to a tertiary care center wherever in the world there is the closest one, and then ultimately they need to be repatriated back to their home. And so we have specialists who do all that, and so that's important. On the property, it's really important to recognize that we have billions of dollars worth of commercial property, and we have some residential, but it's residential parsonages and such for rent.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really sort of a hybrid of commercial property. But we have churches that are open to the public. We have schools that are open to the public and students, and those kind of risks are actually pretty high risk, especially, the worst commercial property to insure, the most unsecured commercial property is a vacant commercial property. And in
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
our small towns and our small churches, frequently those churches are vacant 6 days out of 7, and so
Yikes.
those are very poor risk. Uh,
Mercy, mercy, mercy. Wow. Okay, that just gave me some sermon notes for those sermons we want to preach about making sure our churches are open not just on the weekend, but
right.
wow, it's a high risk, y'all. We need to do
That's
something in the
right.
building during the week.
And so the commercial property is a significant risk, and then of course there's the liability side, and the side starts with property, which is the liability of trips and falls. We call that general CGL, commercial general liability. And so people fall, people get hurt. Frequently, there are people in work bees. We have all kinds of training for people on how to have a safe work bee. Lots of bad things happen at work bees. People fall through attic ceilings, people fall from ladders, people cut trees down on each other, and it gets to
Mm.
be a very ugly scene.
Mm.
So we want people to do things safely and to hire out the professional work that actually involves significant risk. We don't want our volunteers and members to be doing things that they're not qualified and prepared to accept the risk of. And then the other exposures are the ones that everybody thinks about when you think about churches, and that is anytime that you place mostly men in a position of responsibility with regard to women and children, you're going to have what we call sexual misconduct, and we have policies for that under under sexual molestation and EPL, we call it, and these are exposures that happen when you put people together into good and confidential environments.
Wow.
Man,
Good.
I'm sitting here saying all I know is I show up in church on Sabbath morning, sing a song, read a scripture, hear a good sermon. I go home. I didn't know all of this is happening in the
Yeah,
background.
yeah. We have to train people. Uh, we sell our insurance to conference administrators, and so everybody who goes to church regularly knows who their conference administrators are: the president, secretary, treasurer, ministerial secretary, and a few others, right? And the superintendent of schools, etc. So we sell the insurance, the package, to those people, but those aren't really our risk producers. The
Mm,
people who pastor churches, who teach at schools, and who volunteer and work at churches, those are the risk producers. And so one of our big pushes is to try to get our message to those risk producers so they actually produce less loss.
mhm,
No.
mhm.
Hey, listen, I want to pause again to just invite our audience that's watching right now, invite somebody to this conversation. We're already learning some really, really good information. And I know there's going to be more on the table. We're getting ready to talk about some of the high risk issues. I see Stephanie has asked that question in the chat. We're coming right to that in just a moment. But if your pastor, your conference administrator, your local church safety officer, your children's ministry director, those are the kind of folk you want to invite now to this chat. You don't want to miss this. If you're watching this on a replay, go ahead and copy that link and share it with somebody now before you watch any further. Hit the pause button right now and go get somebody and watch the thing. Sit down and watch it with them. I think you're going to learn some really important information this evening. All right. Also, I wanted to shout out. I see Roel Arana Dixon is joining us from Corn Island in Nicaragua.
Mhm.
So welcome. We have an international audience this evening. All right, let's hop to that. Elder, some of the what are the main risk or those high risk elements that we see that we need protection from, and well, let's start there. What are some of the high risk issues, whether it's property, liability, the travel, any of those things? What are the hot issues that cause risk?
Let me give you three real quick. One is the newest one is cyber liability.
Hmm.
Um, so everybody thinks about this. We all hear about this, and there's insurance for this. But the real issue is that I always say, imagine for a minute that there were banks, and in the bank there was money sitting out on the tables, and there were no guards, and there were no guns. And do you think there will be more bank robbers in that scene than there are today? And I would say
Mm.
yes. If
Not in Saudi
anybody,
Arabia and Dubai. I'm sorry. I just
but if just anybody could walk into a bank and grab money, I think we'd find a lot of people willing to try that
Mm.
if there was very little chance of getting caught or punished. Well, the internet is the Wild West, and there's a lot of money and a lot of
Mm.
important and secure data that has to be out there. And so there are people, millions of bad actors all over the world trying to penetrate your system. Most of us have very little money ourselves personally, and so their ability to get money from us is limited. But for companies, schools, specifically hospitals, churches, you have a lot of private and confidential data about your givers and about your students and about your patients and your employees. And so, if a bad actor can get in and shut your system down for you
Mm. Mm.
and seriously preclude you from doing any further business, um, they then command ransoms,
Mhm.
and they promise to give you your system back if you pay them enough money.
wow. Wow.
And
Wow.
that's a huge risk out there right now for all of our
Wow.
institutions. And
Wow.
so we sell that insurance. It's brokered to another company, but the company is very good, and they bring in expertise when a claim occurs that help people get out of that. So that's one. The second one is an interesting property exposure, and I touched on it just a second ago, and that is vacant and semi-vacant properties.
Mm.
There are a lot of really underutilized churches out there, and I
Mhm.
don't just mean the churches that are underutilized by days of the week, but I mean churches that seat 200, 500, 1,000 that have 20, 50, or 200 people in
Hmm.
them. Um,
Mercy.
and and those kind of churches are very difficult for church members to maintain because they can't afford their building, right? And
Yeah.
maybe there was a heyday back in the 70s when that was a pretty big church, but maybe not today. Maybe it was just a church that they got a bargain on because the Baptists gave up on it, right? And
Hello.
so they got a building that really was great, but the building is underutilized. Those buildings are really hard to maintain. And so maintaining, what do they call it? Just keeping up with the roof and the plumbing and all those subsystems becomes a problem, because then when things go wrong, they can go very, very wrong. And the third one is the one that you would expect me to talk about, and it is an enormous exposure, and that is the sex misconduct exposure.
Mm.
And the fact is that we do everything we can to prevent that. There is a history around that one, and the history, uh, we all hopefully read history. Uh, there was a time when the Bible and other people just didn't say much about the wrongness of slavery, and then we kind of woke up to the fact that that was absolutely anathema, and so we started working against that. But it took generations and generations to get to a place where everybody agreed that that was unacceptable. The same thing has happened with sexual misconduct.
Wow.
If you go back in time and you watch that movie 9 to 5, and you see those ladies being treated abysmally, and the movie's supposed to be funny, and it isn't funny. It's
Mm.
traumatic, and it's unacceptable in all of its portrayals of the reality of 1960s and 70s office life. And the same is true of molestation. I mean, I in the last 15 or 20 years, I have personally witnessed juries give child molesters probation.
Mm.
Uh, and I don't know that that's happening anymore, but it is a problem. And it is a problem that affects any time you mix people together. And yes, persons with power are accused of sexual abuse. And we need to talk about what that accusation means and how you supply due process both to the victim and to the person against who the allegation is made, and make sure that the church does right by both of them.
Mhm.
Wow.
And so that's a really, really important topic. I spend a ton of time on that topic. Our mission and our goal, my mission, my goal is that our church never again retain or rehire a person against whom there is a believable accusation.
Wow.
Period. Now, it takes generations for everybody to get on board, but I believe our conference administrators are more and more sensitive to this every day, and they are actually working with me to help with this prevention. But then you go one step further, and that is perceptions. Perceptions
Mhm.
of people from the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. It's a problem because those perceptions take a long time to shift. You turn the rudder, but the ship doesn't turn because
Yeah.
people just remember those earlier days, as they should, right? I mean, those are traumatic events, and we didn't always handle it the best. I
Mhm.
think the Seventh Day Adventist Church did better than some other churches, but nobody's perfect, and our goal now is perfection.
Oh, good,
Mm.
good. I like to dig in, Elder, just a little bit on that last segment there. We heard two terms. We heard due process and then we heard believable allegation. Connect those terms for me: due process and believable allegation. And
So,
as we contrast that against something like a conviction.
right. So a conviction is a simple case, okay? But convictions don't happen nearly very fast. In North America,
Mhm.
anyway, convictions take years. So we're not going to get to convictions right away. Allegations, there is very little in it for a woman or a child or even a man or a boy to make an allegation against somebody. Okay,
Mm.
there's no percentage in it. It's not going to help you. It's not going to move your life forward in most of the cases. So we find that over 90% of the allegations have something to them.
Mhm.
And so we tend to lean that direction, and we'd be right. You know, I mean, if you had a 90% bet, you'd take it, right? So we kind of treat those as very serious. When there is an allegation that is false, you can usually figure out the motivation for it. Somebody's really mad at somebody. There's a custody battle going on, or something else is
Mhm.
happening, and you can kind of ferret out why that would happen. So most of the allegations are true, and so
Mm.
what we want to do is make sure that people against whom allegations are made have the opportunity to vindicate themselves if there is a vindication to be had. And so the church actually has a policy. It's a very good policy in the Red Book. Do you all know what the Red Book is?
The one that we don't
Yes.
get, yes,
Yeah, the
that they
one
won't
that
give
you,
us.
that's the one. And I'll tell you the section and page. It's called E87. The Red Book is the North American Division
Policy,
Working
working
Policy book.
policy.
It's another thick book. It's just as thick as the yearbook, and it has a section called E87. And E87 provides for due process for people who make accusations and people who are accused against, to have a what they call a sexual ethics committee that will hear this in an unbiased way and make a decision whether they believe that allegation to be believable. And if they do, then of course that makes that actionable for the employer, whether that's a school or a conference
Mm.
or whatever. And so we have these allegations. We take them seriously. Here's the problem: historically, when a person makes an allegation, uh, the person against who the allegation is made says, "Well, I didn't do it, but I'm going to make it easy on you guys. I'm just going to resign and I'm going to move on." That is usually satisfactory to a woman who has been improperly abused, right? They didn't want him to be a pastor, and that's what they really wanted, and so that's what happened. The problem is for them then later to come back and look for work someplace else. How do we
Mm,
know that happened?
Mm.
it wasn't fully
Mm.
investigated, right?
Exactly, sir. Exactly. It wasn't
Yes.
fully
Yes.
investigated. And so our
Mm.
goal is that people will enact E87 every time, so that there is a due process record that says, well, we investigated and we found that accusation to be believable. Uh, that's the problem.
Good. There's a
Mm.
question that's in the chat there from the Beacon Network that says, how prevalent is sexual abuse and misconduct by leaders in the church in the NAD versus worldwide?
Just know that about 40% of all uh, misconduct is child on child. Okay, so
Mm.
Wow.
it happens in churches, schools, pathfinders, etc. There's children, teenagers, and younger teenagers typically is that. So
Mm.
that's a bunch of it. Then the rest in North America, since Me Too, I think we've kind of really shut this to a zero tolerance
Wow.
kind of experience. There
Okay.
is still a resistance on the part of victims to say anything, because again,
Yeah.
it exposes you to embarrassment and humiliation, and sometimes you're afraid that somebody won't believe you. And historically, those have been legitimate concerns and fears. And so it's very clear that not all victims report the accusation. Okay, but when they do, we take them very, very seriously in North America, and that means both the United States and Canada. Now we go over to the rest of the world, and it is a hodgepodge.
Mm.
Nobody has the jury system that the United States has. Okay, nobody. Nobody has plaintiff attorneys that can come and take and make and turn an accusation like this into real money for the victim. Every place else in the world either has checks and balances on the jury system, or they have the code law system in which you don't get a jury, you just get judges. Those places also have cultural morals and mores
Mm. Mm-hmm.
that are not 21st century North American cultures. And so, a lot of now, I'll tell you this, the highest levels of the church have asked me, and I have responded to speak to the division presidents from the whole world, because they know that this is a problem, and it's a problem that isn't necessarily being addressed because there's no real exposure there. And so I have been um, given the opportunity to impress upon the division leadership from all over the world that even if there is no litigation issue here, that this is a moral stewardship question. We are the stewards of the people in our churches, and we have to take this seriously, and we have to make our churches safe places.
Mm.
Uh,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, yes. So thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Thank you being transparent about it. You know, some of us we think that the best thing to do is to put our head in the sand and not talk about
Mm.
some of these
Wow.
issues. But I wanted to ask this question about the laws of the land. Some folks see the law of the land being a little more aggressive, or seen where there are more, uh, action being done when accusations come up. I know just recently there was a law enacted in Maryland, the Child Victims Act of 2023. And the Catholic Church, I think it is, or one of the churches, made a major statement right away before the law really came into being. How does the law of the land affect the church, either at the conference level or the local church level, when it comes to these kinds of issues?
So these laws that you're referring to, they go by various names depending on who you ask. But what they really do is they take a statute of limitation. Statute of limitation is what says how long you have to sue. So I'm from Texas, and I tried a lot of cases in Texas. And if you have an auto accident case in Texas, you have 2 years from the date of the
Mm,
accident to sue the
mhm,
person that you think was at fault for the accident. If you don't sue within 2 years, it's over. The person who was negligent gets a pass. And so they used to call them statutes of repose. So statutes when you can rest and you don't have to worry about being sued anymore. Um, it becomes more tricky when the victim is a child. And so
mhm,
in molestation cases, frequently the child is the victim. And so you can't give a child 2 years. And so typically they would give the child 2 years past its 18th birthday, or some kind of scheme like that, to allow the child to have a longer time to make a decision whether they want to sue about this. Typically, molesters don't have a lot of money. So it wasn't a real lucrative thing to do unless the molester was working for a church or a school or something like that. What
mm,
happened with the Me Too movement is people's sensitivities were all raised about these issues, and the sensitivities were, in my opinion, appropriately raised, right? Uh,
mhm.
we need to care about the safety of people, and people who are vulnerable in the face of other people who are less vulnerable. So let's just say that was an appropriate Well, several states, California, Oregon, West Virginia, Canada, New York, and others, and finally Maryland. Maryland's kind of late to the game, but have either obliterated the statute of limitations for these type of claims,
Mm.
or they have extended them, or given a window that you can bring them if you didn't get to bring them before, or you can um, bring them with limits. The Maryland one has a limit. It says you can bring it, but you have a limited dollar. And the reason for that is because back in the day that we've had claims in New York from 1972,
Mm.
uh,
Oh,
and they come up in the last year. Well, what are you going to do about that? Because the policies didn't have coverage for this in 1972.
Mm.
And if you'd have brought the claim in 1972, your damages would have been that big. But if you bring it in 2023, they're going to be that big. And so that is the kind of inequity of the thing. But it ought to be done, and we need to know about these deals. And a lot of the perpetrators are dead.
Mm.
Uh, these laws are sweeping the country as different states become more aware of historical problems with institutional abuse. We've just been to talk to the people from Australia. Australia, is a Commonwealth country, and so they have something called a king. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, they have a king who has what's called a royal commission, and he had a royal commission to study institutional abuse, and all the churches had to come clean, and it was really, really good uh, because the Adventist Church did a tremendous job. Several people there in Australia did a tremendous job of bringing these cases up, being transparent about it, and then moving forward with a plan for how to deal with the future. So
Mm.
I can have so much more information on this. I just don't overload you with the stuff on this, but I'm happy to tell you everything you want to know. You have to
no,
guys,
hey, that's good. Listen, I think Raj, we can we take a break for a quick minute and do
Yes. Yes.
all right. Now I want to
And
give you a heads up, Elder. I know that we are recently out of or finishing up the NAD. Is it NAD year end?
yes.
you're in, yes, they just
I'm
finished it.
cur I'm going to ask you at some point when we come back, is there any fresh news
Yeah.
that comes out of that we can kind of be the breaking news spot on that? So think about that. We're going to come right back. We're going to reset in just a moment. Don't go anywhere, Elder. We're going to bring you right back. All right. Um,
Wow.
Again, if you are just joining us tonight, this Friday night, November 3rd, November 3, you are joining us when we're talking about risky business, the business of ministry and risk. And so we know that we've learned a lot so far, but we just wanted to take this little break to give you an opportunity, if you were just joining us, to catch up on what we've been talking about, to go ahead and to use this opportunity now to invite somebody else to the last portion, last segment of our conversation with
Mhm.
Elder James Winegardner, the president and
Yes. Yes.
CEO of Adventist Risk Management. Roger, if somebody's joining us tonight and they've missed some of our past shows, some of our past conversations, how do they catch up? How do they find out? If somebody just tuned in just now, how do they find out more about Pastors Roundtable and how they can catch some of this juicy, these juicy conversations that we have with our guests?
Well, listen, you don't have to worry about trying to search the internet. You can go straight to the Pastors Roundtable, or the prt.live is the URL, and you will get when I say every previously recorded segment from season 1 all the way to season 7, all the way to
Mm.
tonight's there, and some show notes, which has resources to help you expand the information that is shared in that particular episode. And so you want to go to the prt.live, and you will be able to see every single episode that we have recorded.
All right, that's awesome. That's awesome. So you can go and find out all of that stuff on the website. What else can they find on that website, Pastor Wade? I know they can go and find all the show notes. They can find links to all of the videos, all the shows from beginning of season one. Is there anything else that they find on the website?
Well, listen, we want to just invite you. If you are enjoying Pastors Roundtable, if you feel like, man, this is information that I needed to know. I have to say, as a host, I have learned so much
Yeah.
about my church just hosting Pastors Roundtable, and you would like to see this ministry continue. We invite you to go to the bottom of the website, prt.live. Go to the scroll all the way to the bottom, and you will see a link to support the Pastors Roundtable. We're not telling you how much. We're just saying support us. If it's prayer, we thank you for it. If you would like to
Amen.
share some finances, because everything that you see that is happening on Pastors Roundtable does cost. I remember one pastor saying that the
Mm.
gospel is free, but ministry costs. So we want you to know that we will be appreciative of you partnering with Pastors Roundtable through our support link.
Amen. And again, we thank you guys for joining us tonight. We're going to rejoin our guest at this time and bring him back on again. Pastor James Winegardner, thank you so much for joining us tonight at the Pastor Roundtable. We know it's a Friday night, and at least it's late on my end. I'm in Fort Lauderdale, down on the East Coast there. Where are you, by the way? You're in Maryland, right?
Maryland.
Oh,
Yes,
so you're in
Silver
the
City,
same time
Maryland.
as me. All right.
Yeah,
So even more, thank you for spending this late night with us
no
here
worries.
at Pastors Roundtable. All right.
Let me
I'm looking
can I
at chat.
respond to Rodney here real quick?
Yes, go
Sure.
ahead.
So Rodney in the chat said, there's some bad characters amongst our brother pastors. You need to call them out. Here's the problem, Rodney. You're never going to see the bad actors if you're a man.
Mm.
Mm, wow.
Okay, Uh, they're going to look great to you. They're going to be nice guys. They're going to be winsome individuals. You're going to say, I love working with old Bob, right? And
Mm,
then it's only when Bob gets alone with a woman, or when
Mm.
Bob gets into a situation where he's got some power over another person, that you're going to see that. So we guys are the worst people to call each other out because we don't know. It's
Mm.
only when people start coming forward, and it's weird, the way that it actually works. There's statistics out there, and they vary somewhat wildly, but they're all in the same trench, and that is that when a pedophile gets called out by a child, they usually have, on average, more than 10 victims before
right here.
Mm.
that
Wow.
didn't call them out.
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's true of men who do stuff to adult women as well. So I always say there are two things that can disqualify you from the Seventh Day Adventist ministry. One is obviously being a pedophile. You can't be a pastor if you're a pedophile. In fact, you can't even be a volunteer in our churches if you're a pedophile. But a pedophile is a clinical definition, and it becomes kind of obvious. The other is that you have such poor judgment that you're simply disqualified from being a minister. and
Mm.
and that's, Rodney, what some people can see is just the poor judgment. We see pastors getting into fisticuffs with their church board.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
you know, I don't care if there was a woman involved. I don't care if there was a child involved. You have disqualified yourself from being a Seventh Day Adventist pastor. It needs to be written in the personnel file so we don't rehire people like that. We got to keep those people out of ministry. It
Hey,
reflects.
we were told in school in theology class, we were told never fight with your members. Don't fight with your members. They said, but if you do, make sure you win. That's what don't lose. Don't.
Well, we see it all the time. Don't fight with your spouse either. Don't fight with your church members, and certainly don't fight with children. But all of that is just, those are evidence. And so when somebody evidences that heart condition, that judgment deficit, we need to make sure that they aren't employed in the Seventh Day Adventist
mm,
ministry any
mm,
longer.
mm.
So we work
So,
really hard on
so,
that.
So
so,
I got to push back just a little bit there.
mhm,
So when we say that now in 2023, and then we get up and we read from the book of Psalms, or we go to these people who were holy men of God that spake as they were moved by the Holy Ghost, and we look at Moses the murderer who wrote this stuff. We look at David the king who was a man after God's own heart, who was not dethroned for his indiscretions of murder and adultery and all of those things. How do we respond from a professional we do it theologically, but how do we respond from a professional standpoint of the biblical seemingly contradictory nature of forgiveness and restoration versus never work again? How do we reconcile those things?
So it is an issue, um, and the real question is, what risk are you willing to take with the vulnerable populations for whom you are a steward? Okay, and so when a person, I mean, you use the story of David, and I'll take you up on the story of David because it's a beautiful story with a very tragic middle piece there.
mhm,
Recognize that he was a king, and in those days, kings could have any woman they wanted, and that sort of thing. But look at the life. He was never the same again.
mhm,
His work for his nation was never the same again.
That's why I
And
threw Moses in there too, by the way.
yeah, I hear you. Now Moses was just a hothead in his youth, and God trained him, and I get that. Here's the problem though. We can't know. And when a person exhibits either pedophilia or poor judgment to a level that uh, vulnerable vulnerable people are being injured, we really need to move on from that, because if the next place that you place that person, if there's a new victim, that's kind of on you.
mm,
Mhm.
And I always ask the church administrators, I say to them, listen, which is worse? A multi-million dollar claim because you hired a fella that you should have known was not going to be safe, or the victim that you created because you hired a fellow that you should have known was not going to be safe.
mm,
And I think the creation of a victim is worse than $1 million verdict. The victims are who we're here to protect. And Jesus tells that parable about a stone around your neck if you offend one of
Mm,
these little ones.
mm,
And,
yeah.
and so, I mean, he cursed people who offend vulnerable persons in the church. I mean, to make no mistake, if you read that text, that's Jesus cursing, calling out a curse on people. It'd be better for them, he said, to be drowned with concrete overshoes, as we'd say these days. And so it's a curse.
mm.
And there we are. There we are.
So
Um,
I was going to ask the question. I mean, what you're sharing is duh,
Good.
making sense. But somehow it seems like there is a misunderstanding or a problem in translation when we get to the leadership of the organization. I mean, is it, what is that relationship? I think I might be jumping ahead here, but what is that relationship that you have as the church's insurance company to those that you sell the insurance to? Do they listen to you, or is it just a gentle suggestion and they just have to, they take the risk that that they didn't follow what you're suggesting?
We actually have a clause in our policy. Since we have a captive insurer, we get to write our own policies. And
Mm,
so we don't just have to accept policies that come in the general industry. So we write into our policy that says that if an administrator hires somebody they knew or should have known, provided a risk because they'd done something before, then we don't have to cover it.
wow.
That's on the administrator themselves. Okay.
Mm,
Um, And so we talk to them about that, and we have the privilege, really, it's a great privilege, of once a year talking to the conference presidents in a president symposium. We get a half a day once a year to talk to all the conference presidents. And we talk to them about this issue. We talk about a lot of issues. The healthcare issues are important to them, all these issues. The other is we talk to the treasurers all the time. The treasurers are primary customers. And so we talk to them. Our agents go out there and visit with them all the time. And then we get an opportunity, and this is one of the most fun ones there is. The North American Division has a human resources conference, and more conferences are having professional human resources departments, and it's a very good move. And so we get an opportunity to speak to the human resources department, and that's a fun group of people, and they care very deeply about these subjects, right? And so it's a really good one. We also get Secretaries Council, and we get to talk to them once a year or twice. And so these are really good opportunities. In fact, I'm coming down to y'all's union. Is it a week from this month?
Yes, our departmental meetings. Yes,
I'll be there for that, and we'll be talking to the administrators at that time. So we'll be in the Columbia Union on Monday. We'll be in the Pacific Union on Wednesday or Tuesday, I think, and then we'll be in your union next Monday.
nice. Well,
Well,
I
listen,
think
go ahead.
Paul. I mean, Pastor Paul. I think this is a great time to give a shout out to one of the HR specialists who
That's
are on our
exactly what I was
team.
getting ready to do. Yes, sir. Same page.
Yes. We're just excited to have Stephanie Scott, who is the HR Resource Director for the South Central Conference. She is the one that made this show happen, but she's also a part of the PRT team, and so we just want to thank her for what she does for the South Central Conference. But I know it adds into the other conferences in our Southern Union. So Stephanie, thank you for your service.
And what she does, she's a really great lady, and what she does is really more than that, because we're helping the human resources department. In the past, there was always this training that people gave to you, the super safe thing that people gave to human resources. And that is when somebody calls and says, tell me about Joe Smith that used to work for you, that they used to say, he worked from this date to that date, and he was paid this, and this was his job description, and this, that, and the other. And that's all you say. Don't say any more, because you get sued, because if you say something and he gets mad and he doesn't get hired, he's going to sue you. Well, we're trying to retrain HR people like Stephanie all over the country. Stephanie gets the opportunity to talk to HR directors at all the other conferences. Now, she can't say, don't hire that guy, right? And for the same reason that they used to give that other advice. But what we do give, the advice we do give now, is that when an allegation comes up, we ask our human resources people to write down the facts of the allegation. So the fact says that a member of the church alleged that Pastor Jones on this date kissed her when she didn't want to be kissed. Period. Then you can write, Pastor Jones resigned before an investigation could be completed. Full stop. See, those are truth. Those are facts. And a defense to defamation is truth. You can't lose a defamation case if all you told was fact. Now, what she can't say is, I believe that Pastor Jones was a terrible pervert. Now, that is defamation, right? You can't say that. But you can tell the next employer when they call back, when South Central, he leaves South Central and he winds up in Oklahoma. When he winds up in Oklahoma HR calls Stephanie, and Stephanie can say, while he was here, there was an allegation, or there were two allegations, or there were three allegations, and none of them were investigated, but he resigned during those, and that's all she has to say. Now it's on Oklahoma, because now they either knew or should have known, right? And they can go check it out and see if those allegations have any water. Now, we'd love people to do the investigation back at South Central where that happened. But if they don't, at least the people in Oklahoma in hypothetical will know that something happened there. that they need to investigate.
Is your defamation of me factual if you lead with "I believe" that he
Yeah,
is?
you just you don't ever lead with the I believe. And so
Because
what's
that could be
interesting
the
is we
fact.
always
That could be the factual part of the statement. I do believe that. That is true.
I do believe
That.
guilty. We actually insure people for defamation claims as well.
Oh
And
Mm-hmm.
wow.
so we always say we would prefer to defend you on a defamation claim than a molestation claim. And
That's right.
so please give us the defamation claims, but you don't have to, because all you have to do is give a factual account and then let it be Oklahoma's problem in that hypothetical.
Wow.
Got it.
Listen,
Got it. Got it.
before we move on, you most of our viewers are lay members. They sit in the pew.
Sure.
One of the things that I know that risk management is pushing is our volunteer screening process. Can you talk a little bit about that to our members, the importance of that? Because I've heard it so many times that, oh, they don't want to do it. Particularly, there are some factions of our congregation that may not want to do it. They don't want the government to intrude in their lives and things like that. Could you share with us the importance of that volunteer screening?
Yeah, so it's really important. And I'll tell you, the thing is, the good thing about it is that it provides a framework for
Mm,
people to at least look at the background of people that we're placing in responsible positions with vulnerable people. Okay,
mm,
so that's the great thing. The weak thing: how many people really have a relevant conviction out there? It's a pretty low hurdle, right?
mhm.
you know, and so when we get pushback, and we do get a lot of pushback from people from time to time, when we get pushback, the reason we generally find out we get pushback is that there's a smoking gun somewhere. The people who push back the hardest may have a DWI out there or some other little DUI, I guess many states call it. Or they have some sort of a thing that they're afraid is going to turn up and be really embarrassing or humiliating to them. But it's really important. And you mentioned something earlier that I can wrap right into this, and that is, you suggested that what happened at the year end meeting. And so here's something that happened at the year end
Mm.
meeting that actually is on this subject. It's really interesting. For years, we've been pushing that all of our volunteers, and some places even board members and other people, need to have this background screening. And so we've been pushing it, and many conferences, if not most conferences, have been very compliant, and they've done the right thing. There's cost attendant to it, but they do it, and it's the right thing to protect the children. Well, guess what? Until a couple of 3 years ago, it really wasn't required on employees.
Wow.
Yeah. So a couple of 3 years ago, the North American division passed that it should be on employees. This year, they went farther and said that this is one of the things that auditors, all of our church entities get audited routinely, and that auditors will look for. And if the auditors find that you have an employee that you hired in that audit period that you did not do a criminal background check on, then you get dinged in the audit for that. So they've
Mm.
raised that to the level of an auditable rule, and that's a really good step in the right direction.
Mm.
That's interesting, and that's good that we have you here because I have, we've been hearing this for last 10, 15 years as pastors that we've got to do the background checks, particularly with the folk that work with kids, and then the treasury issue has also come up.
Sure.
What has never been, and there are two areas that I have questions with. I feel like it's my own personal consultation now, but one of them is. Um, when you do the background check, we have never been told what do you do when something comes back and it shows up something, shows something, something you learn. Do you say that that individual, and let's say it's not a sexual pedophilia type thing, somebody has something on that record. Does that mean they can't be the deacon or they can't serve in an office in the church? Has nothing to do with money, nothing to do with children. But what do you do? What's the next step? That is a part that has never been communicated or maybe I just wasn't paying attention at that point. But that's kind of a missing link there. What does a church do when they get something returned in that background check?
So typically, the church isn't going to hear about that unless it is a disqualifying sort of conviction. Okay, because we don't make public that would be a defamation problem. We don't make public the people's criminal history, background history. So that's kept by somebody at HR at the conference level,
Hmm.
and it's very confidential. And they get a return that says there's this, and then they have to make a decision there. So the church people are not going to have to make that decision based on anything. It'll just say no, disqualified. Okay, so that's all they're going to get at the church level, and that's
Mhm.
really kind of as it should be. Um, and so that determination is usually made at a different level entirely, so that it doesn't pollute the population. But let's go one step further with that question, and that is what happens when you know that there is a true bad actor, a person who's made a terrible experience for somebody, and they're down in the church now. ARM provides what's called a chaperone agreement. And so if there's somebody it's an intolerable risk that wants to attend your church, we want them to be able to attend your church if they can. But we want everybody else to be safe while they're there. And so we have a chaperone agreement that will help you to enact in your church so that the person who is a pedophile or otherwise a registered sex offender or something like that will have somebody to shepherd them so that they don't get into a position that they could maybe draw a new accusation or,
Mm.
heaven forbid, a new victim.
Okay. My second question with that was in a lot of our border states and in places like Florida, some of the pushback that we get, and we do get a whole lot when it comes to that, but it has to do with immigration status.
Right.
So often our members refuse to do it because maybe their immigration status isn't up to snuff and they feel like, yeah, this is going to be a problem. And some of us have pastored churches where, yeah, if we don't put these people in office, then there's nobody left to put in office. So is there really some sort of a risk that people have with their immigration status being an issue when they do a background check?
No, we do these background checks with Sterling volunteers. By say we, the entities, the conferences, the administrators do it with Sterling volunteers, and they do that appropriately, securely, and confidentially. And no, there's no. I've never heard of any example of anybody getting into any kind of immigration issue by doing that. You can safely do that. I understand the fear of undocumented uh, persons. I understand the fear. I would be afraid too. I'd be afraid every day. And so I do understand that. But the fact is that undocumented persons have lots of rights and they are protected in most cases unless a new crime is committed. And so if this is not a problem for them, they
Okay.
can safely do that.
All right. Okay. Well, Roger, we ready to hit our last one, or?
Well, let's go back to the chat. I see the Beacon Network asked a question
Oh yeah,
about
yeah.
how do you perform due diligence regarding cybersecurity and in avoiding ransomware extortion risk. Um, as a conference worker, I know a lot of some of our conferences may leave the churches out there, but what are some of the things you can suggest to church leaders,
Sure.
local church leaders, when it comes to this subject?
So just know that ransomware, this kind of cyber insurance is actually pretty new. It's only a few years old, and a few years ago it became mandatory in the policy book, the big red book, and every conference had to have that in order to be compliant.
Mm.
The problem was the industry was so new that they really gambled wrong on the risk. They thought that the risk that they were going to be insuring is the release of confidential personal information, accidental release, and so that's kind of what they thought they were insuring. And then just 1 year into the big push, it turned out it was all about ransomware. And so
Mm.
ransomware or shutting people's systems down is a much more high octane experience than they were expecting. And so their level of underwriting and their level of cost on premiums really took a jump. And you can talk to any conference official and they'll explain it to you. The vendor that we use for this cyber insurance now has, I believe I've heard, it's a 35-page inquiry application for insurance.
Wow.
Mm.
So that is the vetting that they do to see if they want to accept that risk. And some of our conferences have just gotten a no from them. And the
Mm.
no is usually because the conference is not willing to enact normal protocols, uh, to multi-factor authentication, things like that that are really de
Okay.
rigueur in today's environment. You have to do that, right?
Right.
The problem is that many conferences' experiences are small enough that it doesn't make sense for them. And then the second problem that's really tedious is that many conferences they're insuring the whole conference, but I mean you guys know many conferences have no involvement whatsoever in the data network over at the academy
Mm.
or the elementary school
Right.
or these other and
Or the
we know
local
they have
church.
systems, right, or the local church, which many of our local churches have no network at all. They just
Mm.
have a treasurer with a computer, and that's it, you know. But
Yeah.
at the schools that do have networks, the conference usually doesn't tell the school how to do their network. And so when they're filling out this application, are they filling it out for just themselves? Are they filling it out for themselves and all the schools? Are they filling it out for themselves, all the schools, all the churches, all the
Mm.
pastors? Is that what they're doing? We don't know. See, and so that
Mm.
was a real spongy area. And so what we're trying to do now is figure out a way to ensure at a higher level, maybe at
Okay.
the union level, so that everybody gets covered underneath and have some kind of general minimum agreement for what kind of safety precautions that you're going to have to take. ARM is this year paid for a subscription for every one of our entities that insures with us of a program called Ningio. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but we're buying Ningio for everybody in the North American division.
Come on.
It's a really wonderful training system where you get 4-minute videos twice a month that kind of teach you exactly what the question in the Beacon Network there is how these social engineering things work and how to be safe and avoid them. And so the answer to who is liable when it really depends on the policy, Beacon Network. It really is about the policy. The policy specifically tells what happens. We've had some colleges and universities that have been hit hard by
Mm.
ransomware,
Yeah.
and when
Mm.
they get hit hard by ransomware, this our Beasley company has just swooped in and taken really good care of them. So
Yeah,
that's
we have. We I know of one university. Is still reeling from the ransomware episode they have, and so it's disrupting education
and
Yeah.
for
some of our other universities, not that one, but some of our other universities have been reeling with their second and even third attack.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow.
Right.
Mm.
Mercy.
Wow. Wow.
All right. I'm going to tack on a real world question to our last question for this evening. Got an email from my church clerk recently stating that one of the ministry leaders at the church who was on the board was asking for a copy of the church directory. And the clerk was saying to me, I went to the conference church clerk's training, and we were told that we cannot distribute a church directory. That's something very simple. I think most of our watch our visit our audience can identify with. There used to be a day where we would
Hmm.
put out a church
Oh yeah.
directory. It had everybody's picture in there, a phone number, an address, et cetera, et cetera. I said to her, I have never heard of such a thing. I remember a few years ago, I'm telling my age, when you used to get a big old phone book in a plastic bag on your driveway, and it would have everybody in the city's phone number and address in it. I've never heard that we cannot distribute members' phone numbers, and particularly to a board member who was wanting just to organize her ministry team, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to us quickly about that. And then second, and I'll ask the second question follow up. Let's deal with that one, and then we'll.
So on that one, times have changed, and we gotta move with the times. People have a certain level of right to privacy. Now, you can go on Google and you can find them all. Okay, so they're all out there. It's not like we're keeping. The question is who is releasing it, right?
Mm,
You do not want your church releasing any information on your behalf without your permission.
okay.
That's really where you are.
Permission.
It's certainly available on Google. The nexus of this is a program called eAdventist.
Hmm.
Y'all are familiar with eAdventist. It's
Yes.
one of the real data coups of the North American division. They actually created a really neat program to keep track of membership data in the North American division, and it's a really good app. It's a really good program, and your pastor has it, and your church clerk has it, but you just can't let it out to anybody without the permission of all those people. And so
Mm,
that's the issue is permission. And so when you do a church directory, it's going to have email addresses. It's going to have typically cell phone numbers. It's going to have home addresses. I'll do you one better. I have a really good friend who his father was a printer, and his father and he used to set lead type for telephone books back in the day.
mm.
Excuse me. Now that's old school. Lead type
Lead
print
pipe. Mercy.
telephone books. Can you imagine? Anyway, end of it is that it's about permissions, and so unless you go through a permission process that's appropriate, you shouldn't be doing a church directory because the church should not be the entity releasing people's unpermitted private information.
All
Mm.
right. So big issue there is really permission, it sounds like. That's the permission. If you have the permission, then there's no issue. If you don't, then it's an issue. Okay. Last question then. And you touched on it a little earlier in one of your responses to another question. But when it comes to public speech, what's the connection between public speech and risk management, particularly when it comes to pastors, communication directors? Maybe it's just somebody who's a member of the church and it comes across as if they are speaking on behalf of the church. Public speech, what's the connection there as we wrap up?
The insurance industry calls coverage for speech of that sort advertising liability. Don't ask me why. It's not the right name, but that's what they call it, advertising liability. And so this is where the pastor stands up and in the sermon he says I was counseling with Mrs. Jones the other week and she told me about her chlamydia problem and all that and now Mrs. Jones is going to be freaking out, right? And so
But
that's advertising liability. And so Mrs. Jones is going to sue the church, going to sue the conference because he gave information that was completely inappropriate to her. Now, we do insure that. We insure that down to the conference level, which means your pastors.
Mm,
It would be difficult to find coverage for that for individual church member volunteers, but down to the pastor level, we do insure that sort of thing. And we also train our pastors on appropriate divulging of information that's personal about people. It's very similar to the last question. Do you have the permission to do that? And you'll hear good pastors sometimes say, I have been given the permission to tell this story on a brother in this church that I'm going to call, you know, Jerry, and so they get permission to do that, and
Mhm.
permission. If I had something to say to pastors, avoid embarrassment for yourself and others. Always vet your illustrations and get permission if it's a real illustration of a real person, and that
I'm gonna
includes
be
your
in a whole
children
lot of trouble with my
and
wife, man.
children and spouse. My children lived in mortal fear. My spouse lived in mortal fear. I'm the worst practitioner in that regard. Even when my wife is a very private person, and even when the story is one that puts her in a very good light, she
Uh-huh.
still doesn't want that told. And so we got to be really careful. And it is about permissions. And I generally don't have her permission, so I should not tell the story.
Wow. But listen, you talked about a
Including that
pastor
one.
divulging. You
Yes.
talk about a pastor. You talk about a pastor divulging information. But what about a pastor who shares an opinion that makes it seem that that's what the church has? And I think you may be aware of a pastor in one of our cities up north, was in the pulpit and shared that it's all right for husbands to rape their wives.
Right.
And that got quite a lot of pushback, but it
Right.
also showed, kind of shone a light on the church as saying, is that really what we practice? What about that in public speech and risk management?
It is. I wish we had another hour because that's a very interesting question. Down, and that gentleman went back to his home country and did a nice interview down there where they tried to rehabilitate him. Um, that was a cultural misstep
Mm, mm,
because he came from a culture where that was an acceptable thing to say.
wow.
But in North America in the 21st century, it's not acceptable to say you should rape your wife. You cannot say that. You must not say that. It is not true. Now, that is a management issue for the conference
Mm,
where it becomes a risk management issue. And just think this one through with me. Here's a real kind of hypothetical. Think this one through. Let's say a pastor on a pastoral staff uh, shows unwanted, inappropriate attention to one of the females in the church. It includes some touching, right? So she sues the conference because this pastor, they knew or should have known that he was that kind of guy. So we're defending the case right along. And then all of a sudden, the plaintiff attorney starts showing us video of the senior pastor who says things that discount a, a woman's autonomy over her person. Do you follow
mm,
me?
mhm.
Okay. And so maybe he's had a bunch of sermons where he says women need to really submit to their husband and they need to do anything the husband says, and really women need to support to men generally and submit to men generally and that sort of thing, right? The eternal subjugation of women and that sort of thing. Well, that's going to be a really difficult case for us, isn't it?
Mm,
Because the plaintiff attorney is going to make the jury believe that that's the teaching of the Seventh Day Adventist Church. Because look, the
right.
whole staff is preaching this stuff, and then he kisses this woman without her permission. That's just the way that is over there at the Adventist Church. So we really do have to take management seriously. And if our pastors are saying things like that, we really have to ease them into a better occupation for people who believe those sorts of things.
Mm.
Oh boy.
Oh,
I yeah, we don't have the time tonight because our time
Another
is
hour, my
gone.
brother.
But
Another hour.
yeah, because what that opens up is that the new language that surrounds the whole abortion issue would feed directly into the scenario that you just stated, which would make it difficult for Adventist preachers to preach against abortion because it seems to take away a woman's right to her own body, except that's the language that's being used. So Wow, I wish we had. We're gonna have to bring you back, Elder, for that next hour, because this has
Yes.
been rich tonight. This has been good. We again thank you so very very much for taking the time to be with us tonight. We know that it was a sacrifice on your part this time of day and everything, but we really appreciate the insight and the wisdom and the knowledge that you've shared with us and with our audience tonight. And we hope to have you back again soon.
Truly my pleasure and privilege. I thank you,
Thank
and
you.
you are
Thank you.
certainly welcome to my time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Listen, I've learned so much tonight, Pastor Winegardner. I just thank you so much for, I also personally thank you so much for your time and the information you shared. I also want to say on behalf of our viewers, thank you for enlightening us on the uniqueness of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the lengths it goes to protect the ministry, and we appreciate what you shared. Want to say to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us. And we want to say we appreciate the fact that you have partnered with Pastors Roundtable to help make ministry relevant
Resourced.
and real. Goodbye, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.